let's go. Buonasera a tutti signori, welcome a questa puntata straordinaria del nostro Strangeable Speakers Corner, to this extra talk for the Speakers Corner. And first of all, welcome to 𝑺𝑷𝑬𝑨𝑗𝑟𝑑. Thank you very much to be here with us, from me and from my friend, my partner in crime, Eric. So, first of all, I would like to start, just as a beginning, to say thank you to the Old Tavern for include us in this incredible chance in this event about the inclusion in the tabletop RPGs, the first convention in Italy, online convention that we did, and they call Total Party Love. So, thank you very much for this chance, and we included the logo of this incredible event, and we are happy and thanks to the organization of this event to have the chance to speak with 𝑺𝑷𝑬𝑨𝑗𝑟𝑑. So thank you very much, and again welcome to the Strange Ball.
Thanks for having me, guys. Hi.
It's a real pleasure to have you here today with us.
Thank you. It's my first time on the podcast, so like I'm gonna be nervous, but I'm glad to be here.
No, no problem, because we are the most open people. And as I said, you speak about with me, and Eric no, but with me that I have no dignity. So don't worry about that. There's no absolutely problem about in this way, okay?
Very well.
Yeah, it's just a friendly chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
With two idiots, me and Ubibol. So it's easy.
I'm proved 100%.
Making 3 idiots.
Anyway, welcome to all the people. Thank you very much. I've just raised it down. I've just put down a little bit the music, so everything is ready. I think that we could start. Okay. We have some question for you, dear 𝑺𝑷𝑬𝑨𝑗𝑟𝑑, and so the first one is the question that we usually do to all guests, just to, as we said, break the ice. And hello, Alex. Please tell us who is 𝑺𝑷𝑬𝑨𝑗𝑟𝑑. Speak free.
Hi. Well, I'm Alex. I'm 26, from France. I'm a student, a sex worker, and a tabletop designer. I'm also a non-binary trans woman. And I have a blog. It's called Underground Adventures. I write mostly session reports there, and I also try and publish adventures here and there, the occasional rant on TRPGs, especially OSR, FKR, adventure games kind of stuff. And yeah, I think that covers it pretty, that covers the basics, I think.
Perfect. And thank you very much for this interesting introduction. So, Eric, it's your turn.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are very, very interested to your creative process to design tabletop RPG. Could you describe to us your approach, how it works for you?
So basically my process is usually I wake up very late in the afternoon, and I've spent the last night writing a game, and that's like and generally I tend to I post my blogs, my blog articles, and I publish stuff at like 5 a.m. because what happens is in the evening I get an idea, and then I just latch onto it and keep writing until I run out of steam and I'm too tired or crash. And the writing process for like longer stuff is usually I peel for ideas wherever I find them. I take inspiration from a lot of blogs I read. I read and reread Classic Traveler and the original Dungeons and Dragons editions. I think are the ones that I've I've stolen the most from, like taken inspiration the most from. There's also a bunch of like more new wave games like Into the Odds that I go back to very regularly, and I think that mostly it's just like, yeah, I'll have an idea for an adventure I want to run, and maybe it comes with a system, and then I kind of just try it out, and if it's fun, I try to clean it up a little bit and put it out there for people to play if they want to. That's I think that's pretty much it. Like I don't know if I don't know if there's much of a process to get there. Um, it's a lot of cultural osmosis from like the circles I gravitate in, chatting with my players, well, with my friends who like play games with me or like run games with me, and mm, hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think originally it was more like I tried to fix. Okay, so before I tried to fix games, it started out I had like when I was like 9 or something, I had like a monster manual. I had an introduction to the monster manual, like the French version of AD&D 2, and I just had like pictures of monsters and stat blocks that made no sense. And I kind of just figured, okay, I'll just run adventures and get inspiration from mostly the pictures because I was too lazy to try and understand the rules around it. And I played in like 1 or 2 AD&D games with like very nice old grognards who were like, I mean, old. They're not old, but like they were in like very 60s or 70s back then, and and yeah, after playing in a few games, I just started running my own stuff and didn't really know that you were supposed to have rules or like supposed to read rule books and such. So I assumed that everyone kind of glossed over the big books like AD&D, Dungeon Master's book, and kind of just picked whatever was needed. And so the first like years of running games were mostly emergent game design from running games kind of like freeform-ish with like a dice roll here and there, and then keeping the stuff that worked and eventually making it into house rules.
I would just I had time to exchange opinion and to have a chat with you in these weeks since our common friend Michele gave us the contact, and I found that this brilliant approach that you have in the creation of game, it's very very interesting, and it's something that you can easily see from your games that they are so I say catchy, but in sense that they just from the intro you find the curiosity to go and see what will happen over there, even because they are not so very long games. So if you have a good introduction, as you can usually put, like the Medusa game one that I love it very much, it is something that it's very expressive of what you are saying right now. So I appreciate it very much, and it opened me a world because I completely ignore what is the movement of minimalistic gaming in this sense. So it for me it was a total discover, and I'm very happy about that because for me no stop learning is the mantra of my life. In consideration of this, another question that I have is, what are your inspiration when you write this kind of games?
So like beyond the TRPGs, which is honestly a lot of my like, I haven't read that much fantasy and sci-fi. Like I tend to run a lot of sci-fi fantasy stuff, but I've read Gene Wolfe, like Book of the New Sun, because of Troika.
Yeah.
I read a lot of Kadic when I was younger,
Yeah.
and a little bit of, I think I read the first 4 books of Dune, But besides these, I'd say my like appendix N kind of deal is more movies. It's some movies. It's a lot of like French. I don't know how to say like comic books. It's not really comic books. It's like bande dessinée. But
Oh, yes.
but a lot of these when I was younger. And I'm looking at my library right now, trying to like get
Don't
help.
worry, don't worry. You can do it.
Uh, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland
Yeah.
is also like I think one of the things that got me like, oh, I want to run like kind of adventure games where you're not being like superheroes, you're just like mundane people, and like Alice's Adventure is just about like a little girl wandering in a fantasy world. There's a lot of there's some cyberpunk stuff also because I tend to gravitate towards cyberpunk when I'm not running fantasy things. So I've read like Neuromancer by Gibson, and I think just this one and maybe Count Zero had so much more fluff and like interesting stuff in them than when I first read Cyberpunk 2020. I mean, I love Cyberpunk 2020, Mike Pondsmith's game.
Yeah.
But when I first read it, I was like, this is so cool. Where does this come from? And basically, I just went and read some of the fiction around it. And I was like, oh, okay, I can run a game from there. And like fast forward was mostly I read Neuromancer and I was like, okay, how do we do this? But without needing all of the crunch from Cyberpunk or Shadowrun. What else? What else? Philotomy's Musings is a very important, like early OSR text that got me interested in the original edition of Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yes. Quite.
Very, very well. Recently, there's been like Scorn that's never leaving my side.
Oh, wow.
Amazing title. I love it.
It's delicious. It's by Sam Dobler. I can't say names. He wrote this like really tight FKR, I think. I think he calls it FKR too. Like dark fantasy game that's based off Berserk, and Berserk is another one of like the big, I guess one of the big like fantasy stories that I mean, I was gonna say relate to in some ways, but like overall that spoke to me. And it's the kind of adventures that I like to run, where it's more gritty and dark and like not desperate, because you gotta have like some hope to make a dark fantasy world be interesting, but very brutal and violent and so on. There's also nightmares. Like the thing is like I've had a lot of nightmares very often from like a very young age, and so I had a dream journal very early on, and I kept writing in it, and very often I wake up and I'm like, this is actually really interesting, I should put it in a dungeon or something.
Okay.
So nightmares. Movie wise, it's kind of broad, but it's not really fantasy. I like lots of thrillers, lots of horror, some like more intellectual psychological horror is good for tone, but I think like the B movies are great for actual adventure content.
Yes.
Like I'm trying to think of an example.
May I just ask which kind of B movies? I'm curious.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to think of. I'm trying to think of like what was it? Mostly horror.
Yes.
But these have been. It's been a while, so.
Maybe something like Army of Darkness or something like this. I don't know.
Yes, stuff like Evil Dead,
Evil Dead, it's amazing.
Evil Dead.
Evil Dead,
Evil Dead.
zombie movies. I
Yeah.
had like a whole period where I was like super into zombie movies. I've never managed to run a successful zombie themed campaign for some reason, but I love like zombie apocalypse fiction. I think Max Brooks' like zombie survival guide, though it's a bit dated now. It was pretty fun. That was a book though. That wasn't a movie. Video games also. I wanna not mention that like video games have been a huge inspiration because of like all the vibes that you get from being fully immersed in a world.
Yeah.
And like I really like immersive sims like 𝑺𝑷𝑬𝑨𝑗, Deus Ex, some horror stuff like Amnesia,
Mhm.
some indie stuff also like Gunpoint.
Oh,
I think
Gunpoint is amazing.
Yeah.
it's great,
I
and
really love
think
it.
Gunpoint is like it's already like layers upon layers of like inspirations from the genre of like noir stuff.
Mhm.
But I hadn't really read or seen anything like I think maybe I've seen Chinatown, but most of what I gathered from like noir was from a parody of the genre. And so
Okay,
a lot of the
amazing.
time I end up running games that are more based of like post whatever the genre is, like Snow Crash, I think, is like post cyberpunk, and it's kind of like poking fun at some of the codes of the genre. And that's probably because like most of my games aren't very serious in I mean there's like a serious setting, but then when we play it's kind of always really silly because I can't keep a straight face when I run my NPCs, so they will like break fourth wall and say stupid shit, and overall be it ends up being like there's always some degree of tongue-in-cheek um, to them. Forgot what the question was. So
No problem. We
No,
just
worries.
leave you speak because your inspiration of everything it's quite 360 degrees. So I just I think like Eric did. We are just listening to your uh, your um, your words. So don't
Yeah,
worry about that. Talk
No,
freely.
problem. No problem. We are here to chat with you. So you mentioned a lot of amazing stuff as an inspiration. Also, I want to mention for those who doesn't know that French people are very, very lucky for the bande dessinée production, local bande dessinée production. I read some of them. Okay, I think that oh my God, excellent.
look at
I
the
love
art.
Excellent.
I love the format of most of your bande dessinée or of your comics, and I love you have a huge production of comics coming from France. That most of them doesn't leave France. That's a pity, but I don't want to go too off topic. But you're very very lucky because every time I come in France, I go in big comic store and I see all of those amazing comics that I say to me, oh my God, these people are very very lucky.
Yeah, I haven't had the pleasure to like buy a physical like a bande dessinée since a very long time now. But I remember when I used to go to the library, I'd always come home with like 10, 12 of these like random ones I just pick from the cover because I didn't really have any idea of like where to look to see like okay what would be fun. Um, I think one that I really loved was the stuff of Enki Bilal.
Oh my God,
Uh,
yeah.
so he wrote like the Immortal trilogy that got adapted into a video game and a movie. There's like Mobius, Jean Giraud.
Oh,
I
wonderful.
Of
think he's
course.
pretty famous at this point.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely
Absolutely.
famous.
Absolutely.
So like Giro stuff. See, earlier I said like a lot of the time I took inspiration from stuff that was already like post. I read a BD that was called the Meta Barons, I think,
Oh my God, yes,
when I
Mhm.
absolutely.
was like 9 or 10. So I couldn't follow the plot. I just liked the pictures,
Yeah.
and
I think it's a very mature story for a 9-year-old. Yeah.
yeah. So the thing is, like in France, the you get exposed to really like adult stuff in comic books, and there's
Okay.
very little oversight if it's not from your parents. And my parents were like, as long as like you're fine reading the stuff, it's okay. They didn't like curate what I read. So um and also there's a lot of like honestly, even in like French manga or like French manga inspired stuff. There's a lot of like really horny stuff. There's a lot
Yes, I
of
know.
violence.
Well, I don't mind this because I think that people should. I don't want to go completely off rail on the topic, but just to be brief, parents should watch what kids read, and it is not the duty of those who produce the art, the comics, the books. So when you are ready to read something, okay, you can read it. But I don't think that it's wrong. It's good to censor, sorry, stuff because there is when you are too young, there must be someone who watch what you read, but not cut what should be on the market.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
Consider if I can add just one thing, so I can share 50% to going off topic with my friend Eric. I could say that when I was young, very young, I think that comics was one of my first love. And for us, when I was young in the 90s, there was just only the American comics and the Italian comics. But as we can see, even in my town, that there was a big comics about outdoor comics. There is a lot of erotic and nice, very nice, but erotic and full charge of, as I can say, image not for children, because you know the comic was considered just for kids, no, at that time was not considered art. But we here in Italy, like in France, because in France you have Mobius, but here in Italy we have Milo Manara, Ugo Pratt, and they are very incredible artists that design men and women in some way that comics was not so usual. Anyway, I think like Eric that when it's a question of art, everything could be applicable, okay? Because art is art. We cannot say that is not art, that is something more, and something like that. Otherwise, nobody have to go to see some statue with naked everywhere here in Italy
Well,
or in Europe.
yes, absolutely. And so you mentioned before FKR. So I just like to ask you, what do you think of the OSR movement in tabletop RPG, and how does OSR relate to FKR? Or if you can briefly explain what FKR is for those who are watcher and are not familiar.
That's that should be an easy question, but it's actually really tricky, and I think like most of us navigating in the FKR don't necessarily always agree on what exactly it means, but I can try.
Okay.
And like, so the OSR I understood as looking at the early history of TRPGs, and especially early editions of Dungeons and Dragons,
Mm-hmm.
like these baby.
Oh my God.
And
Yeah.
Wow.
yeah, I'm gonna flex my collection. I don't get
You
to show it off
Show
usually.
it, show it.
show it. You're welcome to show it.
We
And since now we have seen a lot of very good stuff.
And And so like D&D and like Traveler.
Oh my God,
This
yeah.
is this
Ooh.
one is the original 1977 box
Oh my
set.
God.
You hit me on the heart.
You have a stunning collection, so you should flex it.
You hit me
I'm
on the
really
heart
happy
What's
with
about
the
that
this
point?
one.
manual.
What's the point of having some stuff not flexing it?
Yeah, and I got super lucky because I found this one in like a bin of like random books, and I was like, holy
Yeah.
shit.
Wonderful. Keep that
Um,
copy of Traveler as bar of gold, please.
yes, absolutely. And so yeah, the OSR I think started off. I mean, it's hard to say when it started. I think probably around 2008 or something like that. I wasn't super online. I was super online, but I wasn't like very fluent in English because um, I was probably 8 and 4. I can't count. 12, 13.
Okay.
So I missed like the very beginnings, but I think around 13 or 14 years old, I started like reading a lot more English blogs
Mhm.
and stuff. And so the old school Renaissance started off as like getting interested in these older playstyles, picking what was interesting about them, and trying to understand that a lot of the time I think there were a lot of misunderstandings or like myths about older stuff being janky and broken, and eventually if you read them, if you read like the original Dungeons and Dragons,
Mhm.
and you approach it with the idea that these aren't bugs or holes, these are features, and there's usually a good reason that something is one way or another. Uh, it can reveal a lot of potential that might be missed if you're approaching games from I guess a more modern take. Like I think back then was like mostly D&D 3 and Pathfinder 1 were the big games. And FKR okay, so I'm gonna give like how I arrived there rather than like the general agreed upon
Mhm.
definition,
Mhm.
because
Yes.
I think
Yes.
there's like some it
You.
evolved beyond that basically. But like what I did was I got into the OSR, and I think at first it was probably Lamentations, but I
Mhm.
don't really support lot of people anymore. So I kind of I'd use like old school essentials, delving deeper, like the early retro clones.
Mhm.
And I thought this is really cool. This lets me skip on a lot of unnecessary stuff, but I think it could be streamed. It could be streamlined further. It could be like stripped of some crunch. And at some point, I looked into the OD&D Pro Boards discussion forums that has like a lot of people who have been playing D&D since its inception, or like in the 70s or 80s. And I started kind of like studying Dungeons and Dragons 1974,
Mhm.
and I got really fascinated by how it seems to do a lot of the stuff that
Mhm.
even in like BX I found it does it different. I was gonna say it does it better, but like this is just like it does it better for what I want out of it, which is it lets you build a campaign and a set of house rules like as you need it, but you can start with like very little and kind of let it happen naturalistically, so that like maybe you'll need like an extra class because someone wants to play like a paladin or something, and you can use like Greyhawk, or you can just like make it up, or you can say, well, you're a fighter, but we'll also cook up some magic powers that fit with like the idea of a paladin and so on.
Mhm.
And at some point I was like, I read Classic Traveler Out of the Box from Tales to Astound, which is a great series of blogs about Classic Traveler. that kind of does the same. It did like a very in-depth exploration of why the original like 1977 and 81 versions of Traveler were super interesting, and that it actually tells you. I don't want to be. I don't want to misquote Traveler because you had Mark Miller over earlier, but I think it basically lets you know that like you can't have rules covering for every possible situation, and that's normal, and you're supposed to kind of make up what you need for the game. And Traveler had a lot of stuff that weren't in D&D, and it still worked really well. Like there's no levels, there's no classes. It has a skill system. It's one of the few skill systems that I like because it's not prescriptive. It just gives you like broad notions of like what the characters can do. And so I started like house ruling away more and more stuff from my D&D game. So at some point I removed alignment languages because we weren't using them. Then I removed alignment entirely. Then I removed like classes. I was like everyone's a fighter, which is like the default adventurer. And then I was like, the ability scores, they don't do that much, right? They just like describe, they help you describe a character. So like you can be like, okay, you have 15 decks. I can infer from that this situation will be handled in such and such a manner. But like the modifiers and the subsystems, there's way less of them than in say AD&D, right? And so I tried to see how much I could remove and still have the game feel like D&D, which is kind of nebulous notion, but like to me it was like the sense of adventure game, like Zork, where you're like focused on materialistic pursuits of like trying to get gold or like trying to advance your position in the world, trying to change the setting without really using like character builds or like exploiting rules or anything like that. It's just kind of what you want to do within the setting of play. And I removed most of the stuff, and it still felt like D&D eventually. And I found that like you could go, okay, I'm gonna run chainmail. So chainmail uses like there's a man-to-man combat table that's 2d6. I was like, wait, Classic Traveler also does like just 2d6 for most stuff. Maybe we can just get rid of most of the subsystems and just keep that general notion of like roll high. And yeah, back then I was exchanging a lot with someone I'm not really in contact anymore because of different worldviews, we'll say.
Yes.
And with him we figured like, okay, so there's this whole I guess I was a bit dissatisfied with the impression that the OSR seemed to be mostly focused on strict retro clones or like strict use of like the original editions, and a lot of talk was about house rules and making like classes and such. And so we had like there was this idea that like we don't have to care about game balance as much, but it was still a lot of talk about rules. And I was like, why aren't we talking more about like making worlds and just like settings and NPCs and adventures and such? And I read this post by Mike Mornard, which is called "Let's All Be Fuckers." I think that's how it's supposed to be pronounced. It was like "Let's all be FKR."
Yes.
Okay. And he said that for him, there never was a renaissance of the old school because he'd always been playing this way. And I was like, oh shit, that's what I was doing when I was a kid and I didn't have like rule sets. I kind of just like built up the game as I went. The main difference between how I ran games when I was 9 and how I run games now is that I learned about how to maximize like player agency, stuff like the Quantum Ogre, basically just like not railroading and not like forcing people down a path. And I got lost.
Don't worry, take time, because your explanation was great. I was
It's
totally,
amazing. We are
yeah.
learning a lot of things and very interesting things.
We will
Um,
totally under your control, because your exposure, your way of saying the things, it's so catchy and interesting. So now I understand why the introduction of your game are so interesting and catchy, and where
I try.
these things come from.
I try to kind of assume that people don't need to be told how to run a game. And I found that in a vacuum, when you're not dealing with people who are coming to the table with certain assumptions in advance,
Mm-hmm.
because like a lot of the time, when I still had like now I mostly play on Discord, but before that,
Yeah.
I would play with like my partners or like their friends, and there were mostly people who were either uninitiated to TRPGs or they heard about it and they were like, okay, it's the funny, like they call TRPGs Donjons et Dragons, like Dungeons and Dragons is just the term for TRPGs in general. So very
Mm-hmm.
casual approach to it, and casual in a good way, by the way. And like and so I started running. I think I ran Shadowrun as a near diceless FKR thing with like I used like basically 2d6 saving throws. Like you know the saving throws in D&D. Well, I did like the or like in Classic Traveler. Basically, I had the Traveler saving throws character sheets that were made from taking off the pages of Shadowrun with the archetypes and telling them, okay, look at the numbers. If it's a 6, it's like very strong. If it's a 1, it sucks. Otherwise, don't care about it. And I handed out these characters to a group of friends, and we played the game, and we had a great time. And mostly it was like really fluid. We could do a lot of stuff in a very short time frame. Like usually I run games that are like 1 or 2 hours long at this point, because beyond that I'm too tired because adulthood is terrible. uh, and yeah, I noticed that I could get away with rolling very little, with having just like a very basic framework for how to resolve situations. If I couldn't make a call as a GM, as an impartial GM, I could just like be okay. Let's ask the dice, and maybe like roll high is good for the players. And not only did they have a great time, but one thing that I didn't get before from newbies is that half of them, I think, came back to me later and were like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm running a game next Saturday. Do you want to play? And I was like, yes, absolutely, that's great. Because usually, before that, when I was running like more complicated rule sets, people would be like, intimidated by the idea of running games. They were like, "It sounds great, but I don't think I want that work. I don't want to learn rules and so on and so on." And so people were usually like shying away from GMing. But after running stuff in FKR, most newbies they just go like, it's obvious to them that it would be easy to do because it's actually really easy to do. Uh, if you don't have like a lot of prep work to do, or a lot of like rules to understand, or like game balance to take into account. And they ran games with that intuitive understanding that and I'm talking about adventure games here, because I know there's like games that don't really have that framework, but like the way I see games is mostly you're you having like situations
Mm-hmm.
that aren't scripted, and you just want to like apply creative problem solving and do stuff. I think Michael Raston's Context Spiel D6 has the best description of what the player's agenda is, which is your goal is to have interesting experiences without dying.
Hmm.
And I
This
think
is
that's all you
fantastic.
need.
It could be the title of an adventure of any possible OSR like that me and Eric we could love. So it's very
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
I could
And
steal it.
Absolutely.
You should. I think it's like some kind of open license. Like people go check out Context Real D6. It's great. Um, it's like one page. Anyhow, FKR. I realized that a bunch of other people are also interested in this and have kind of like went along similar roads where they got interested in like the older TRPG stuff, and we started a server. We started a server, and that was before I transitioned, and that was before I got interested in politics again,
Oh,
and without really. Uh, Basically, there was a lot of problematic aspects to how we approached that first server. It was meant to be like an apolitical space, but it
Mm-hmm.
ended up being very much not that, because at this point I think there's no such a thing as apolitical spaces or like products or someone. And some people came out about that and were like, this is not gonna work, and they made another server, which is the Friedrichsspiel Collective, which I recommend people go onto because it's great. It's an explicitly leftist TRPG space about like Friedrichsspiel stuff. And by being like very leftist, it's also like very inclusive and open
Mm-hmm.
to like marginalized groups. And it's around the same time that I came out as trans, and I realized that I was hanging out with a lot of people that were basically crypto fascists, and somehow that didn't work so well after a while. So I kind of like dropped the server, and also kind of like went into hiding away from like internet for a while because I had other stuff to deal with, quite frankly, than like TRPG stuff. But pa, 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 pa.
yeah, I totally understand the situation, and no, no,
Me too.
well, me too. Sometimes you stumble upon people that makes you feel uncomfortable, and then you need to take some time for yourself, and this is
Yeah.
important. This is very important. I also agree from for something you said quite before of you should not tell people how to play. This is something I couldn't agree more, and I couldn't stress enough about this. Because if there should be a way to play tabletop RPG, it should be written in the rule book. So I think that you just need to read the rules, understand the rules, how to play, and then that's it.
May I tell you one thing that I found from your words that I found very interesting? There is a double way to intend the game. You have a very clear and wide picture and scenario of what are the rules of the most of the tabletop RPGs in the history. Not only the fantasy, even in the cyberpunks one, even in the science fiction. So your knowledge of this is very wide, but your approach to the generating the lore or what you want to put into the lore of your games come from your direct experience. So this sort of two sides of you, it's very beautiful because create something that it's quite unique, no? And I always appreciate when there is a common view in the rules and in the lore, or sometimes, as I found in your case, there is one path in the rules and one path into the lore. So there are two, uh, like a train rails, no, that go even parallel, but that doesn't touch so close. Okay, so it's very. I found this very interesting in sense of creating games, creating worlds, adventures, even extreme or not. It depends from the moment, from your life, from your period of your life, and this is very cool. I found this is
Yeah,
my feels about that.
Thanks. I guess I think the eye opener was like Chris McDowell,
Mm-hmm.
who wrote Electric Bastion Land.
Oh,
It's another great book that people should.
yes.
It's like I don't buy a lot of RPG books, but this one is I love it. Uh, Bastionland and Into the Odd is great because you have this very you read Electric Bastionland and you have like a very strong sense of the world, and it's both a thing that Chris came up with and a thing that the table is gonna appropriate and the GM is gonna get from like their own experiences and like projecting onto the art and onto like the 100 archetypes for like characters that you can type of characters that you can play. And the solid thing is that it's one of these few fat books that doesn't have paragraphs of lore you have to memorize. And I think that's the approach I prefer also, where I prefer to have a short, evocative, like I'm trying to find like maybe in Murder Soup. I think I have a folder called Stuff I Did, trying to find Murder Soup. You are brutal warriors from the northern wastes. Your land were obliterated by the mighty sorcerer Arga Khan. Without a place to call home, you became reavers, enemies of all magic users. Strike the earth for blood and wine, for gold and glory, or sweet revenge. That's the whole. That's the setting. Like there's a few random tables that like let you generate like some barbarians, and then you kind of go from there. And I love the idea of very strong thematic settings with like a lot of lore, but I find that they usually work best when they emerge from play rather than something you have to really study beforehand. Uh, there's a few exceptions, like Shadowrun. I think I got like really interested in a way that like let me run games in that setting without. I mean, I haven't read like a lot of books, but it's mostly the art, I think. So I guess it also works that way. It's like you look at the art, you go, "That's so cool! I want to run an adventure there." Talislanta is great at
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
giving you like very short. It's like it's a big book. Like the blue book is massive, but every part of the setting is so like you have this world map. You see this world map and
Oh
you're
wow.
you're already like, oh my god, there's so much cool stuff. And then you go like, okay, there's the Kang Empire. How does this work? And there's actually like maybe 4 pages, and the 4 pages have a lot of evocative stuff about the Kang Empire. And then you can just make up everything else as you need, and that's I think way more efficient a way to write games. As I think at least it's something that I find more accessible, both for myself and for like I said, like these people who shy away from like having to learn Baroque systems. I think they also might not be super into reading 500 pages of lore before being able to run something. Like I really want to run Eberron, but like I need someone out here, if you know Eberron, can you write a primer of like 10 pages tops that explains everything that's important about Eberron, please? Because whenever I try to read stuff on it, it's like 100 pages seems to be the minimum. Uh,
If Kate Bucker is listening to us, please don't take it too bad this one.
Yes. Absolutely.
it's a great it looks like an amazing setting. I'm just bird brained. I can't process the walls of texts, even if they're like really well written. And so it's like it came out of necessity to write like shorter terse stuff and to write like a lot of stuff that helps you generate things on the fly. I think Jason Tochi's Tochi? I don't know how
Hmm.
to say it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's okay.
TOC.
It's okay. It's okay.
He wrote like 24X and the 24 series. These are amazing, and every time you have like 1 page of explanations, 2 pages of how to make characters and play the game, and like one end cover of like 4 tables, 4d20 tables. But he crams so much evocative stuff in them that even if you're not familiar with the genre, I think you can kind of like have all sorts of ideas on it, and you can pretty much run them on the fly. You can like pick up one of the 24 games and in the same evening you roll on a few tables while people are like making characters, and you can start running a game this way. Um, yeah.
Absolutely. Wow.
We
Wow.
are amazed by your words. So first of all, thank you very much. It is very so interesting to listening to us and your wide experience, and I think that you have almost read about anything possible. So this is very incredible, and so I have very good feelings of what you said, the whole things that you said, because it's very comprehensive of anything about your opinion, your tastes, that you could agree or not, but the way that you express it is so interesting. That's why.
I'm glad, because from my perspective it sounds like mad ramblings. I don't know if I hope
Oh
it's
no.
useful.
Absolutely. It's absolutely useful.
Okay, let's keep on with a question that we planned. We go to the probably the most interesting question. What do you think about inclusiveness in role playing? Do you think that the situation has evolved, or are still many barriers? Do you think that a role play among the many purposes can have an educational value to promote inclusiveness?
Okay, so Helm is a great example of what I want to see more. So I'm gonna go and quote from Helm, and then I explain where I'm coming from. So like on the third page of this like tiny OSR FKR-ish Berserk inspired
Mm-hmm.
dark fantasy RPG, they go, this is a game based on sword and sorcery fantasy fiction and makes no attempts to portray an accurate representation of the Middle Ages. As such, gender roles or restrictions based on social strata are thrown right out the window in favor of inclusivity and representation. If the presence of strong women, gender marginalized persons, and LGBTQA plus people rocking chainmail and kicking ass confuses you, the author recommends taking a long walk off a short bridge. So this one is like really dry, and I like it because I'm not super interested in like debating people who would have my existence be like put into question or like be a debate. And I want to be able to play games and enjoy my hobbies in spaces where this is the norm, where like people aren't going to be facilitating or compromising with people that just spread hatred.
Mm-hmm.
And I think early on, at least like from my perspective, so like I live in France, but I run a lot of games with like mostly Anglophone people.
Mm-hmm.
In France, I'd say it's changing slowly in the sense that like for a very long time it still is a hobby that's dominated by like cis heterosexual white men, and like some of them are allies and some of them have take issues with like gay people or minorities in general. And it can make it difficult to find a table easily. Like you can't really like before coming out, I could like go on Roll20 and pick a random table and be like, "Can I join and play?" Uh, I think if I did that now without having some sort of like telltale sign in advance that says like everyone's welcome or whatnot, I wouldn't necessarily try because I'd be afraid of like things not being basically not being super safe. Um, but I think there's a lot of effort that went in like people writing games and like putting these disclaimers often more diplomatically than the one I quoted. Um, like Chris put something at the end of Bastionland about how like the old school has a lot of you have like visual traditions of play, but it doesn't mean that you have to reproduce the same tables, and it doesn't mean that you have to reproduce like um, the bad stuff about the older times, basically. So for me, I've had the chance of mostly playing within circles where I know people are already safe, so I can't really say how it is in like the mainstream exactly. I have some people like who play in French circles that have told me that it's still pretty bad, like trans friends or so on, that are like you kind of have to be within your own circles. But there's a push. Definitely, there's been pushes in various communities to make the hobby more inclusive. Um, there's more. There's women designing games. There's games designed by minorities about their experiences. People from minorities, like I'm gonna shout out Fantastic Medieval Adventures, I think is the name, by 𝑺𝑍𝑵𝑏, who wrote my favorite D&D retro clone. Let me think. It's a tough question. Also, I should probably have started with like a disclaimer that like I'm describing my experience. It's not the experience of everyone that's in similar cases as me. Like, you're gonna have what's the word? There's like a lot of there's a diversity of experiences from different people with different backgrounds, and you want to kind of try, I guess, to make it welcoming for marginalized groups. You have to make it explicit that you are welcoming, and also that abuse or like hate speech or even just like general bigotry will not be tolerated. Because the thing is, like, we're here to play a game, right? Like, we want to have fun, and we're like, you're off work and you want to just like have fun and not worry about whether people are going to be respectful to you or not, because that should be a given, right? Like in any environment. But the sad reality is that a lot of people in positions of privilege don't necessarily understand that what is easy and accessible for them isn't going to be for people with less privilege. And I guess the way I try to push it on my end is by including either like short disclaimers that are generally like quite they're like reverse dog whistles. I will write a game and straight up say like if you're a fascist, drop this book, fuck off. And if people take issue with a statement like that, I want to have the conversation with them, so it's fine. Because but this way it kind of like curates who is going to get interested in the games, uh, and so you can have like communities forming up around these, like the 24 games by Jason. They have like he does mention something on his blog about inclusivity, and I think the booklets themselves, they have stuff about safety, uh, and like safety at your table is something that should, I think there should always be like I play fast and loose with the rules of like how to handle situations in the game, right? But I think it should be very important to keep very strict rules around consent and comfort for everyone involved in a game. So like I try to, if I'm gonna play with someone new, I try to let them know that like if there's anything that they're not comfortable with, like a topic that they don't want to bring up during a game, or themes or whatnot, we use like lines and veils, which is like one of the most well-known tools for safety, I think. Lines and veils, or should I like give a quick breakdown?
I missed this one.
Okay. I'm gonna quote from 24 because he wrote it better than I can. It's pretty simple. Basically, the idea is either session 0 or at the beginning of a session, you wanna, where is it? I'm trying to find a good summary of it. Essentially, oh, there we go. So you lead the group as a GM. Although I think it's a responsibility for the whole table, everyone's comfort. But usually it's like kind of assumed that the GM is going to like host and facilitate the game, and because of that, it's good if no one else does it, then the GM should ask people what they are okay with having like happen on screen.
Yeah.
Like let's say, okay, I'm gonna give like a strict example. Like I'm cool with fantasy violence. I'm cool with like gore. So if we go like we're gonna describe how a goblin, how you fight the goblin and he dies and how that happens. Might be okay. But then you'll have people that say, well, I would be okay with romance happening, but not being described in detail, or like no graphic violence, for example.
Yes.
And then you have like topics that people just don't want to have as a part of the game because it's just beyond what is going to be fun to interact with. Like for me, it's generally sexual assault. Like it's a thing that can come up in games that are that could be worked around in games that are trying to explore something really dark and difficult. But it has a place there, and it shouldn't be something that's just like dropped in the game. And the thing is, everyone's lines and ways are going to be different, so you want to make them explicit. And in one of the last articles I wrote about this, I said that basically, I think TRPGs should be kind of like BDSM, where you have like a social contract that should be really clear in advance about what you're willing to discuss or not, what you're willing to play with or not, and then have everyone kind of like make sure that everyone is still on board while the game happens. And the way I describe it might sound like it might sound like more work, but I think it ends up being way less work than if you kind of gloss over it and then end up. When I was younger, when I was a teenager, I've ran horror sessions where, for example, I ran a Cthulhu session that involved themes around drowning and a storm, like a storm and like a place being like flooded. And I learned during the climatic horror parts of the adventure that one of the players was like deeply like aquaphobic and like scared of stuff around that, but in a way that's not like fun scared, in a way that like was triggery.
Yes.
And I learned that when I realized that she was having a panic attack.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I was like, oh fuck, this is not fine. And we want to avoid that, and we want to avoid having people be in a situation where they're having to juggle with like, am I gonna be able to handle like whatever comes up in this game. And like I think it's important for me because I play a lot of games that have like very dark settings, like I said, like dark fantasy stuff. I love Berserk. And I think whenever you run stuff that's not feel good, very like low stakes, I'm trying to find examples, but I don't run a lot of these. But like when I run games for like kids, usually things are very low stakes and like no one's gonna die and so on. But even that notion of like you can die in the game might be something that people may or may not be comfortable with, like stuff like maiming and such. And so having that discussion before the game helps a lot. And I mentioned violence, but like topics that are that can be touchy for people who are like parts of marginalized group are gonna be like an obvious one, where like, do we want to have sexism in this setting, or like if maybe it's in the setting, but we don't want to have it be the main topic of an adventure, for example, like um and it can be the same with like racism and so on, like where you should have a discussion about that. Like if we're gonna run a Western
Mm-hmm.
RPG set in the Wild West, we want to have a conversation beforehand about how we handle colonialism and racism and so on with regards to what degree of like fantasy we want to go into, because things can get hairy pretty fast.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I remember when I first started like getting interested in these, I ran this Western game that was completely like kind of like it had like blind spots around issues around colonialism, where we didn't really have like native people involved in the adventure itself, but there was like fantasy. There were like a tribe of fantasy creatures because it was Weird West. And while we ran it, we were like, something feels off. And after the game, I thought about it, and I was like, I think this was kind of like like we sidestepped some things that we should just have talked about in advance, and maybe like as a GM I should have like thought about more carefully and so on and so on. So yeah, basically be respectful of other people's consent and limits, and also sensibilities is the word. Yeah, try to also like educate oneself on these things if it's gonna come up. Even if it's not gonna come up in the game, I think people should educate themselves either way. It can only make the world a better place. So like,
Yes.
just for your gameplay, not just for your gameplay, game table.
Well, absolutely amazing, and I think you covered a lot with this answer, and it's really amazing. So I'd like to ask something that comes from the chat, and it's from. So 1 second, I'm searching for the question. Okay, a tricky question. I think it's from Ubibol.
No, no,
Hi,
no, no, no,
people.
no. I put in
Okay.
no, no, no. I just added on the top. If I remember well, from was from
Okay.
from
No,
Derro
Dero.
Archivista.
Okay. The question is this: what if we use RPG, obviously previous social contact at the table, to show topics like racism in the fiction, so we can think about it from a safe but deepened perspective?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I wrote an article very recently about trauma and the exploration of de-empowerment and like violence, like the not fun kind of like fantasy violence
Yes.
in your fantasy worlds. And I guess yeah, I'm not saying you should excise anything that's like hairy or has the potential to bring up problematic topics from settings. I think having uh, issues like racism or sexism or ableism and so on within settings of plays uh, can also like make the experience way more interesting. And in some settings, it's kind of impossible to go without it. Like if you run a cyberpunk game and it's not political somehow, then I'm sorry, but it's political probably in the wrong way. like
Okay.
um but like in my case I like to have I like OSR because I like to play and run in worlds where you're the underdog and things are kind of stacked against you, and terrible stuff happens to good people for no reason, because that's my life as a trans woman, as a sex worker, and so on and so on. And it's not stuff that I would want to shy away from in adventure games. But yeah, I think you have to have the talk beforehand, and that means that, for example, if you go, okay, we want to play in a game that features fantasy racism as analogies for real life racism. I think you should have some degree of like, if it's just with your table, it's best if there's at least some degree of there should be like education on topics, and like maybe talking about people who might be um, Kuku might be able to like give you pointers to like, okay, so this is how it can have been done good, or this is stuff that you want to avoid. And also, I lost my train of thought, but I had an important thing to say, so I'm gonna take a second to think about it.
Yeah, don't worry.
Um, ba, 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 ba.
In the meanwhile, may I tell you one thing? One person called Cosmic Curry, it comes on the live and said, I didn't interrupt you because you were spoke about the things very important, but he come and say, I come from into the live and I saw my drawing over there. So I said, thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, Cuckoo Cosmic. Cosmic Horror is a great. She's a friend, and she writes TRPG stuff and TRPGs. I think. She's got some Scorn hack cooking. She's got a blog. You should also go visit it. We talk a lot about FKR stuff, in particular Scorn. We've been playing a lot over the last few months, and she did the art for Sword, which is the last game I published. I think she did the cover art, which is really cool, and I'm thankful for that. So hi, thanks for being here.
Yeah, I think he's gone, but I promised to him to send the recording of this talk. Anyway,
Yeah,
Her.
Sorry.
I think, right?
Please, I made a mistake. May I have another question that comes from the chat? It's from my friend Wasteflesh. It said, what do you think about the villain's behavior in a game? It is correct to have a villain who could be racist, or else I think a villain could have those behaviors since the character are usually in the right side. But I also like the different kind, like a Pagan Mine or Far Cry.
I love I love Far Cry 2 also. Like, it's a game about it's a video game, but like you play a terrible basically like American guy that comes, not necessarily American, but like a stranger in an African country that's like a war torn, and you get up to mercenary stuff that's just awful, but it's also a pretty interesting setting to explore. And so in TRPGs, yeah, sure, you're gonna have villains that do terrible stuff. Again, as long as it's been discussed in advance, I think it's perfectly fine to go like really. You can go deep with this as long as you're treating it with some degree of mindfulness to how it can be interpreted. For example, recently I played in Western, like a boot hill game, and basically we were tasked with assassinating a gang of it was set before the Civil War, and these were like pro-slavery southern gangs that were very explicitly racist fucks. And part of the fun was that we were like, okay, we can have the fantasy gunslinging blood meridian type violence, while also having it be set in the actual like pre-Civil War era America. I have a good example of a bad way to do a thing in my own writings. And for once, I'm glad, because I'm actually tackling something that I'm personally familiar with. So like in Fast Forward, one of the adventures I published is an investigation scenario where you try to find a missing person, and that missing person is a sex worker. And in retrospect, the main role of this character in the story is to be a victim, and she kind of gets like very little, like as is, she's already dead when the adventure starts, so you're just like, okay, this is just a tragedy that happened. And it can certainly work. Like, I wouldn't mind running it, but I think if I were to see an adventures and I'm like, okay, there's just like a sex worker used, but she's like just a victim and has very little agency, kind of sucks. So I won't name drop, but I read an adventure recently that had kind of like, it started off pretty interesting. It was another kidnapping situation, and it was about a woman being kidnapped by a gang, and it basically went, yeah, so basically she's facing the threat of rape, and you handle it however you want at your table. And I was like, that's not a great way to do that, and that kind of turned me off from the whole adventure, even though it had cool stuff in it. Because what could have been done instead was either not use specifically that if they weren't willing to like basically take the hit, or ask people for a sensitivity reading. Say like put a disclaimer about the adventure that approaches the topic in a way that's respectful in as much as it can. And there's another adventure that's pretty cool. I think it's called Unicorn Meat, where I did a little bit of that sensitivity reading with like other people did most of it mostly, but like I mainly recommended the person put like a little disclaimer like, yeah, so this is going to be, there's going to be an npc that has had like sexual assault as a part of her background, and this is how you can either avoid it or basically have it be a part of the adventure in a, it's treated like as a secondary thing. It's not like a dramatization of like specifically that event. It's just a part of the character of her story, and this way I think is more respectful and like sensitive to it, and that's how I would also try to approach it now. And I've been thinking about like redoing fast forward with like less rules and stuff, and I think I would also rewrite the adventures to make that investigation thing either not either or, actually. I just give more agency to the npcs involved, especially the victim, so that she's not just a victim, because there's it kind of reeks of princess in a castle kind of tropes in retrospect.
I think that the reply was complete. Nothing
Yeah,
to say.
well, absolutely. So we can stay here to talk with you forever, but I think you have also a life. So we would like to conclude with a last question, and that it is uh, any. Can you share with us any sneak peeks on some of your future tabletop RPGs or something you are working on?
Sure. uh I've been doing a lot of Scorn related stuff. I want
Oh,
to, because Sam Double made the thing like an open license, so you can make your own Scorn hacks, and I think that's great because Scorn is a great game. And the thing I wrote is called "Fuck Adventurers," and it
okay.
starts like this: You are creepy weirdos kicked out of the dungeon. Your goal is to have interesting adventures without dying in a world that hates you. Um, you have a nickname. Don't tell people your true name, because those who speak it hold power over you. Also, you have pronouns. These are safe to share. And basically, you play as fantasy creatures like goblins, trolls. You can be a duck, like you know the barbarian ducks from RuneQuest. You can be a skeleton.
Yeah.
It's very simple. You have like a bunch of traits and instead of stats, and mostly it uses Scorn, but I just like wrote it in my own voice. There's a lot of yelling because I write in all caps. Um, I'm trying to find a little bit that could be funky. You have to kind of like scavenge to get gear, so you start with very little and you're not expected to survive. And it's like one page, so I probably won't sell it. I'm just gonna put it like on in pay what you want or something. And
Okay.
there's like a d6 table for adventures. Something like a giant fire breathing lizard told you that you were her minions now, so she wants you to go find a prince and kidnap him and bring it back to her as a gift. Do what she says or become food. And
Okay.
all of the adventures are like that, where it's like you're in a terrible situation. from the monster's perspective, and you have to just figure out how to survive. And I picture it as kind of like goofy, kitchen sink fantasy, slightly survival horror, but like more comedy than anything else, really.
Amazing. This is
Wonderful.
amazing. Can't wait to see it.
Cosmic, please do the art so I have something that I can showcase for it.
This is an official request, so now she cannot withdraw from this. Absolutely not.
So I think that we are arrived to the ending of this incredible talk, and it's the first time that I speak so few words. So it was unusual for me because I am the one that keep chatting and say blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
This
Sorry.
no.
You were
No.
amazing, Alex. You managed to keep his mouth shut up.
Absolutely. Absolutely, but don't tell these things while drinking. It's not good. otherwise everything comes out
I'm
from the
joking,
nose.
obviously.
Anyway, I think that this talk was really amazing things and open up the mind and the thinking of the people in a way that probably we will never do it, me and Eric. So your contribution to this talk is a wonderful moment. And I think that even if we are on streaming live, I hope that the file on YouTube where we save this talk will be spreaded just to let people understand what is a good position to the inclusiveness and to the approach of a tabletop RPGs. For me, it's basic. So I think that I can say just thank you. Grazie in Italian.
Prego. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me and like hearing me out. And yeah, I'm glad that my ramblings were meaningful and like to you. So that's cool. That was a great chat.
Absolutely, for us and also for our viewers. And yes, as Wasteflesh says, that Ubibol guy talks too much.
Yes, even with bad words, don't worry, because I love them. I love Derro, I love Waste, and I will catch them after the ending of this live somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah. Also, thank you, Derro. That he say, wait, don't downplay Eric. It's true. It's true.
Don't downplay Eric. Anyway, I think that we can go to the end, and I say again, thank you very much, Wizard. And in the future, if you and your artist, Cosmic Curry, would like to come back again into this talk, you have my contact on Discord, and just we can keep a discussion about anything, because I love very much to have a discussion with you, and I hope that the people will see more and more games come from your mind, from your imagination.
Thanks.
You're more than welcome.
We should play RPGs together or something.
Yes, absolutely. Why not? Why
we
not?
are not so far, by the way. So we
Why not?
should arrange, and we should invite you in future conventions playing in Italy, if you would like, and this would be very, very good.
In English. I can
In
try,
English.
we'll see.
No, my French is inexistent. Just a merci, something more. Don't let me speak French, please.
Pas de souci. Vous inquiétez pas.
I'm terrible. Rhino on a glass cellar. Anyway, thank you very much, Wizard, and I hope that you find this talk very interesting, like we found, and we are very pleased to have you here. And thank you very much. We thanks again the Old Tavern, Total Party Love, and our common friend Michele to arrange this chance that it was very incredible for us all. And thanks also to the people in chat that tonight was very. There was a lot of people, so this is very good for the spreading of what you said. So thank you very much again, and we will go off live. And thank you very much. Thank you to Eric. Thank you to Wizard, and see you next time.
Again, thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.